So dear friends, I'm very glad to see you. I'm glad that despite that we have the whole week, you are not doing nothing. It's very nice, it's very encouraging. Now, we had a number of sessions that you received the program. You can follow that we are still in line with what was set up at the beginning. And at the beginning we said that at the very end we'll talk a bit about Europe, but Europe in the globalized world from which we started. We started with globalization. Let's see how Europe feels about European ways, European identity in economic and social relations. I would like to put it in European economic and social relations, and I would like just to stress some of elements when Europe has its strengths that differ European Union from the other countries or regional organizations. However, the European Union, I would like to again stress, it's not an organization and it's a usual understanding. It's a regional setting. This is a very special regional organization that has its own supranational structures. But since we put the topic as the EU in regional arrangements and in international arena, and I would like to again let me stress economic and social relations with the countries in Asia, with Americas, but I'm going to generalize track. Yeah? Let me point out some moments, and I guess that we will have an opportunity to discuss what is meant by this. So I will very briefly touch the global agenda, the transatlantic agenda, and the regional agenda briefly, because I know that we have today our question and answer sessions, and it would be nice to include these issues as transatlantic agenda, regional agenda, as well as the global agenda that we have several hours for the discussion. So in the global agenda, from the European Union point of view, possibly or from the point of view of other regional integration schemes, which is also would be true, so we can try maybe to generalize and to say that global agenda now relates to the increasing economic integration worldwide that we discussed in the first class and the second class. Also, its management in a way to conduct integral development. So then what is absolutely urgent now in the world is financial stability. And we can add to these points in our discussion issues from the Davos forum that I asked you to look at, as well as the risk report that also came this year from Davos forum. Okay? So what would be the risks? And if you remember the questions that I put for you, for example, what are unexpected risks for our regions? Say for my region, I'm living in Europe, north of Europe, close to Russia, as we discussed today with your director, but better say where we have a border in our country, Latvia. We will talk about not only particular countries but also the European Union. And for example, what are the unexpected risks here in India? Right? So that are the most important things for the global agenda. But we also can say here right away that the European Union in global economy, it is a fragmented power. So the European Union, since, as we discussed from the presidency of Mr. Barroso, who was the president of the European Commission, and he tried to, and successfully tried to bring the European Union to the international arena as the global power, to balance the power with the other emerging economies and also the United States. So still we can say that European Union is a fragmented power. Why? Because there is a need for the European Union probably to have better harmonized policies outside the European Union as well as inside the European Union. These things affect each other, the internal environment and external environment. And here in this paragraph you can see that the adjustment and response to the emergence of new global economic powers, and mainly Asia, and absence of progress elsewhere, mainly Africa, that also influence European Union position in the world. Because as we know, the European Union cooperates with countries in Asia, cooperates with countries in Africa, trying to provide support, having the development policy of the European Union. But nevertheless, the response to the emergence is an adjustment to this emergence, the emerging economies is fragmented to some extent. What differ, however, the European Union, and that I would like to stress, what differ the European Union from the other countries or from the bloc of countries, it is position of the EU in regulatory matters. So we have around the globe, we have the regulatory competition. That's maybe new for you, maybe you already are familiar with this, but let's again to stress it, all right? So we have the regulatory competition. We have internal versus external success in regulatory matters. And this is very much referred to the European Union. So we have European Union taking care of the regulations, inside the European Union. We have a number of regulations in the common policies, and we have regulations in form of advices, in form of respecting principles of subsidiarity in the European Union countries, but nevertheless we have recommendations, yeah, in the areas which are not common. And that is very much linked, for example, to competition, that this is an internal success. We have a common competition policy, right? And it's not finalized the internal financial market policy in the European Union. It also affects the external financial market policy in the European Union. So the European Union is a player, is with its regulatory matters, is with its experience and influential power, but however the fragmentary we can also see here. What is important, and maybe that is for you who will be interested in research related to the European Union, that no research, substantial research, has been done and attempted to provide an overall picture of Europe's interaction with international environment, outlining priorities and discussing policy coherence. So policy coherence, that is what is extremely important for the EU side in internal policies, right? The coherence. But now the priorities, what should be harmonized? And in internal environment, what should be harmonized? This is still a matter of discussion in the EU because we have a position of the 28 countries. Every country has its own position, and we have respect for the countries. It's we can put it nicely in the context of the identity, national identity that we discussed, and identity of nations in the globalized world and in integrated world. So how this works and how the European Union is trying to perform. The principles of subsidiarity also link to the issue of the coordinating methods. This is the open methods of coordination. And open methods of coordination, this is the principles according to which the European Union internally acts when we do not have a common policy. Open methods of coordination, this is sort of an abbreviation, as we know, and it's very much where it's used. It's used in which policies? What is open methods of coordination in the European Union? This would be social policy, open methods of coordination, right? This would be education policy that we do not have. That obviously would be migration, for example, policy. So we can think about policies that are not shaped as commonplaces in the European Union. Okay? So that's why the priorities and discussing and researching these priorities and discussions is very, very important now. Policy instruments. So we know that the EU has entirely harmonized trade policy, right? Participates in the international finance policy and in the development policy, but also these policies, if we can say internationally, to look at this, right? We will have the WTO, this is trade, right? We have the IMF, that is also financial policy, and we have the World Bank that will go for the, I mark it here, for the development policy, right? The World Bank will be on the development policy, right? Any other suggestions for these institutions and for the policies that are planned there? Do you have? No? Not for the moment? No? You are thinking to say something? No. Okay, let's go for it. Now, if we come, for example, to the environmental policy, internationally, do you know any agency or any international institution that would be entirely responsible for this? Here I think at least one of the institutions. Yeah, which one? Which one is missing? Say?
IIFC.
Well, international recognized, that is not only international
It's
recognized.
related to climate change.
Which one?
IIFC.
Okay, so I suggest to put here United Nations Development Program. Yeah? Then in cooperation with the World Bank, they would be, they would cover, I don't want to say responsible, but they correspond and they cover by their policy the development. Okay? Yeah. Now, we have as the global risk, we have as an importance for all of us, environmental policy, right? That we also mentioned several times. Now, environmental policy, there is no institutions that single forum, I would say, as a single forum, as a world institution that taken care of the environmental policy. Environmental policy is also not a common policy for the European Union. Again, we will use all the methods of coordination for the environmental policy in the European Union. Do you agree? Or you have some other suggestions? No? So then we can conclude there are areas that need still international cooperation and international setting of institutions, of forums that would be responsible for important areas in our life. Now, one of the positions that I wanted to discuss today is the Transatlantic agenda for the European Union. Here is of utmost importance the relations between the European Union and the United States. Yeah? It's not only because now we are discussing the new agreement that is coming maybe by the end of this year, it would have a significant progress, yeah, on the common trade and investment. But we also have the EU and the United States in situation when they act commonly. Yeah, for example, current situation that leads to the sanctions, yeah, over Russia, for example. Today it was confirmed that President Obama would like to continue sanctions for the next year, for the whole year, right? For example, in this we say collective quest, which means the European Union and the United States could be possibly act together. However, we don't know yet still the response of the European Union on this new initiative. However, it was expected, so we can think what it could be. However, we should take into consideration possible position of some member states in relation to that. But let's be back to the EU and US, why they are together very often. They have 40% of world GDP and world trade in purchasing power parity. Right? They have less than 10% of world population. That's not very good. 40% is all right. 80% of international norms and standards that regulate the world market. Okay, so I'm back to the beginning. The regulatory power of the European Union, internal versus external. Obviously, if you are a very highly regulated regional arrangement, if you are highly motivated to regulate your activities inside, it's obviously come outside if you are a significant international player. You cannot play otherwise, not putting your regulations or your demand for regulations if you have it inside, right? It obviously comes to the your relations with the other countries. So you see 80% of international norms and standards comes from these two powers. It's a lot if you think about it. Now, what we have in Asia, for example, China and India, I believe you would agree with me. If you disagree, please let me know immediately, because I might know quite many things about India. They're still far from the body of laws and institutions that are essential in order to be effective regulators. Is it true in case of India? No? You think about it. So we, for example, have a competition policy. Is it a competition policy? Is it a regulated area in India? Is it a common competition policy in India? Do you have a common competition policy in Pakistan? Yes, no, or no answer? No. Or is it a process? It's in the process.
One is competition.
Yeah, it's not a common. Okay? So we confirm, not yet a common competition policy. From which country the competition policy has been generated?
States.
The United States. The United States. Chicago School of Economics, antitrust. All theories that were implemented and introduced by the European Union, so common competition policy. So obviously it is very well developed in the United States and in the European Union, and in cooperation, for example, in trade, obviously it comes here, or in the comprehensive agreements. When we negotiate comprehensive agreements, you have to negotiate the competition, right? And there might be different responses from countries, from social partners in these countries. We have extremely well developed social dialogue and social partners in the European Union. Maybe they are not always successful, but they are very active, right? Or for example, we have them in Canada, and what we have when comprehensive agreement between the European Union and Canada was discussed, then the Labour Congress in Canada were making protests as well as trade unions in the European Union. Why? Because, for example, in case of procurements, right, that are announced in Canada, any European company can participate. And if it wins, then it takes from Canadians part of their activities, part of their job, so on and so forth. So then we have product and financial market regulation and technical standards.
Yeah.
We are not saying that in the United States and in the European Union, all the technical regulation, technical standards for products and financial markets are entirely harmonized. No, and that is what put the difficulties in negotiations of this comprehensive agreement between the European Union and the United States right now. Right? So it was also a number of disputes between Canada and the European Union. And when it comes to the comprehensive agreements with Asian economies, Again, we have products and financial markets regulations and technical standards, right? So technical standards for example, vehicles in the United States and in the Union different. So obviously, they might be, we can also find them different when we come to the economies in Asian world, right? Producing. The same story would be with African countries. So the regulatory power and the regulators of the world. Again, let's conclude for the moment that is European Union and the United States. Now, regulatory competition. So from one hand, we have a united European Union and the United States when it comes to norms and regulations towards the rest of the world. However, the European Union and the United States, when they act separately, they can also have a competition and they have opponents and they might themselves be opponents to each other in the global regulatory environment. Okay, so they can cooperate with each other, or they can also involve new global powers. So how this, you see, we are coming to another scenario. How this regulatory competition will work between the United States, between the European Union and emerging global powers. And these emerging global powers would be emerging global powers. That is concern of the United States. China, Brazil, Russia,
South
BRICS,
Africa.
despite the fact that it's getting weak, but nevertheless, right? So this is the need to have the harmonized regulatory power, which is not always the case, because these countries can bring their own rules. So to make the competition and antitrust and environmental protection and international currency to be not an impediment, but to help the countries, excuse me, and regional organizations to cooperate, which is not always easy, right? But again, if we come to the block of the EU and the United States, when it concerns these items, different policies, they might also be not always together, not always united in these actions. So each of them wants to be the leading regulator. Which one do you think is more serious than another one among these two? Would it be the United States or the European Union? Which one do you think has the high regulation rate?
United States.
United States?
Yeah.
EU? How many of you think the United States? 1, 2, 1. 1.5. I don't know, it's 1.5. And the European Union? Yeah, we'll have, well, not the entire class, but we have a dominance. And I would agree with you that the European Union as a regional integration is more regulated. However, the United States is the country, right? With the common market from its origin, sort of, from its origin, right? With the common currency, and the European Union is not. But the regulation is stronger in many cases in the European Union. Okay? So if we come to the EU-Asia, we can say that EU and Asia represent about 60% of the world population, 52% of global GDP, 68% of world trade, and EU trade and foreign direct investments with Asian partners are increasing regularly. So they're regularly on the increase. So this EU-Asia is very strong trend. But if we compare this 52 GDP, 68 world trade, and if we come to here, So which one do you think would be stronger, EU, United States, or EU,
India.
Asia?
Stronger.
It seems that EU, Asia is
Stronger than.
yeah. If we will add to this not only economic but also political, cultural, human rights, and other issues, yeah, which are very often disputed between these represented countries of Asia and the EU, then this arrangement EU-Asia would be seems in some particular areas stronger than the European Union and the United States. Now, what we also have in terms of the EU, and we speak about the EU in international arena, we have EU and Middle East and North African countries. This is, of course, very controversial issue to a number of reasons. I'm just thinking in terms Commission, we have different agenda. We have agenda that is about digital common market, that is about social policies, this is about the social agenda, this is common, right? We have regional cohesion, this is also common. So what else? I think that the targets to reach set very properly according to the target. Another thing is how it will be possible to implement, right? And it's not only depends on Brussels, it's very much also depends on the member states. And in all the member states we have European Commission representation that try to communicate, and in many cases very successfully, with citizens. But if you come to the, for example, info center and look at what the European Commission representation parliaments are doing in Riga, in Latvia, I'm receiving every day information of the events there for everybody, for children, for pupils at schools, for elderly people, for students, for NGOs, for everybody. But then the information is available, so come and get this information. But sometimes they are also willing to talk to people. But you know, the European Commission representation are financed from the budget by all the member states. There are not that many people. There are not that many people. For example, in the presentation in Latvia, and now we run the presidency, and the European Commission representation should be active and participate in all events. They in fact have 2 people that are changing each other in official events, and they have an office that I think about 5 people, not more, if not less.
In fact, to answer Stefano's question about how the crisis, the Euro crisis has been affecting the identities, what you're saying, that people are having kind of a negative feeling about being a part of the European Union. But Stefano, we had one senior professor from Italy who made a presentation at the Europa Punt in Bremen, and his thesis was entirely different. What he was saying, his research output was that actually this Euro crisis, if at all addressed correctly, should actually help in the development of the collective identity. In fact, he connected the entire idea of the Euro crisis. He said, so why the collective identity has not been working on this while for European Union is because we do not have a common narrative, we do not have a common story. But if the Euro crisis is actually attended to, in fact, if EU is able to overcome this particular problem in the stipulated time, then it will be like, we have a common story, we have a common narrative to talk about maybe in next 15 years. But then if that happens, and then that would only add to the collective identity, and that would actually strengthen the identity was what his thesis was. Maybe we can discuss it.
I think that the thesis could be true if the answer to this crisis is a further integration. And I think that at this stage is one of the possible solutions. To go further with integration.
But we also discussed that the European Union is moving forward if there are crises or if there are some scandals, right? Then it makes it big leaps. Otherwise, it's small steps. And I don't have an answer, but what you think about what is better to be developed by small steps, careful ones, or you are making big leaps and then don't have time to see where you are going. And in the case of the European Union, in principle, it is very difficult to move because you have 28. And 28 should say their opinion, and then they have to their parliaments. It takes time. Well, again, imagine when we have 6 member states. There is a special rule in the European Council when countries are sitting at the table. So when we have 6 countries representatives sitting at the table, this is a normal size, could be even less. Big. 6. Now there are 28. We were with my students in the council this year. We saw this huge huge table of this 28, may I get it for a second? And then in front of each country, there is a name of the country. There is a name of the country. For example, here is written Latvia. Latvia now is sitting in front because we are the presidents. Right? Next half year we will be sitting here, and the next will come here. Then it is a rotating presidents, right? Then we move here, and the next one comes here. Then we move further, and the next moves here. But it's a huge table. It's a huge, thank you very much. It's a huge room, it's a huge table. And they are sitting together already when they negotiated in corridors and everywhere, right? When they negotiate. They are sitting at this table when the press is coming, when there is a show, when there is a newspapers and everything. Otherwise, to make the decision to move further, for example, in time of crisis, if you are in Brussels, you see it very often, that Saturdays, Sundays, there are a lot of cars in front of the council. There are manifestations in front of the council. Then you cannot move, right? Or you move in Brussels where the King Palace is, and there are a lot of cars. The whole square is busy. Why? Because the reception. Why there is a reception? Because it's a protocol. But they are coming to Brussels. They make decisions. They come for the nice reception. They come home. Then the next week it's the same story. So they were coming regularly in terms of, frequency. I think the crisis was the most frequent one. Now the sanctions with Russia, this problem also is bringing them all the time come to Brussels to make decisions and then come back home. And when they are coming back home, they're saying, it's not our decision, it's a decision that comes from Brussels, we are innocent, right? And then comes the representation of the European Commission and saying, well, people, do you know how the European Union is functioning? Please. In times of crisis in Latvia, I can give you one of the examples, doctors. They were writing a letter to the European Commission representation saying that the government of Latvia, we saw yesterday's letter, cut everything. Public spending, health programs, everything was cut down, right? Not entirely, but to the very large percent. So they were writing, a group of famous doctors, were medical doctors, were writing a letter to the representation saying, could you please influence the decision of our government? And the representation saying, well, we are sorry, we cannot help. This is up to the country. We don't have a common health, public health policy. This is the country matter. So the Commission is also trying to explain that is what the communication is about, what we are doing, how we are doing. But many people still do not know. We have the European Studies Master Program at the university, and we are functioning already 15 years. So we have about 500 graduates. We are very happy. Most of them are in Brussels. A lot of them are in public institutions. Some of them in private business. So it's very nice. But when I receive, for example, an article for review from the doctoral student from the same faculty but from the different program, then I have to mark that, well, if you write about the European Union, different issues in integration, you better first try to understand what is the European Union because you are writing stupid things. But most of people, they do not know what the European Union is about. Even if they study at the same building next to the European Studies program students, but if they do not have in their curriculum programs about the European Union, they don't know much. But the question is, again, is it better to live in the environment of the European Union or to study the European Union from books? I think it both, because when people live in the European Union, they really do not know how the decision-making process is organized in the European Union. And then they can be easily, by the journalists, Exactly, because the journalists used to say, well, it's Brussels decides, you know, about your not nice things in your life, it's Brussels decides. But if you know how it functions, then you say, no, sorry, it's our politicians. It's not Brussels. But this is, for that you have to understand how it works. But the problem is that, again, there is no common educational policy. The European Union tries to have some common subject about European integration, even for engineers. It would be good for medical doctors in Latvia to know that there is no common health policy. Then they would not spend time to write this letter, right? They will probably act differently if they would know. So would it be good to educate them, or it would be considered as a part of ideology and imposing the European Union culture, and especially if the European Union is not doing that well? It's not doing that well, right? We have recession, we have problems with the common currency, right? We have the problem of communication, we have a number of problems. But I think it's better to know what problems we have and try to solve these problems rather than not to discuss this. Now, if you have a question. Or remark? As you wish, you can answer. I'm happy.
Yeah. Okay. So we take a break of 7-8 minutes, right? Okay. So in this course, as we have already been discussing about cultural analysis and European identity, in fact, we have been having some discussions about we are looking at identity more from the cultural perspective. But of course, it cannot be completely separated from the political or the economics, and the geo-economic realities of the world. And with all of them in the background, we are actually trying to understand the question of identity, whether it has been working, not working, what exactly are the hurdles in creating a collective identity. Is there a way to address them? Should it be addressed at all? Does it in any way affect the multicultural fabric or the multicultural in general? Where having this collective identity, would it mean making it more cosmopolitan rather than making it more multicultural is what we are looking at. I think we have already had some basic discussions on that. And so maybe I'll invite some questions from them, and after that maybe we can have a one-on-one interaction about it. Are there any questions?
Yes, you have a question.
Is world better off with EU and US in cooperation or competition?
Between the EU and
US.
The United States?
Yeah.
It's a very good question. It's a very good question. However, I think that to answer in one way or in a few sentences, it's very difficult. I think it's a very complex matter that always is in the geopolitical context. Well, if we are going back to the beginning of the European integration and the European economic community, it was a very, very strong cooperation with the United States, and especially in economic theories, it just coincided that European community appeared when the economic integration theories were developed, and the leading institutions that were researchers, scholars that were working on this integration theories, they were from the United States, or that was Anglo-Saxon contribution to the international trade, to the international economics and the international trade. So the integration theories, it's about 50s, 60s. European community, economic community was founded in the 50s, in the 1950s. The Second World War finished, and the Marshall Plan that came from the United States to the European Union again quickly, that started the Golden Age of Europe. So also the American promoters at that time, they suggested to have a similar model in Europe, similar to the United States. Obviously, it was not the idea only of the United States, because, for example, Jean Monnet or Schumann who suggested the same, or Churchill that suggested the United States of Europe, right? So it was a common understanding that small states cannot be efficient if they act separately. So there is need to have a common market for these states, that they will be more efficient and the producers will be more efficient, don't have restrictive practices, and as a result, we can say that the ideology, economic ideology suggested by the United States, economic ideology, but obviously it's also affected the multiculturalism culturalism in Europe, right? So it was a parallel process because you build the economic base and at the same time you build societies and you have a common ideology with the United States of Europe. Don't forget that European nations, many of them, and the United States were also allies in the Second World War, right? And that's exactly what Dr. Ingmar pointed out, that what is the collective memory, or what unites people. And then we said that well, it's a crisis or something else that moves the European Union forward. But the collective memory, for example, also referred to the Second World War. The problem, I think, was this, that it was a common understanding, and what Europeans always were saying, that would differ the European integration and European Union, and why we need European Union, because we don't have a war in the European continent, right? For a long time, since the Second World War. We don't have the large territories involved in military conflicts. That's why we're looking with worries at what is happening now in Ukraine, which is the largest by territory country in Europe, not in the European Union, but in Europe, right? So that was the collective memory of the Second World War, that it should not be repeated. The problem now is that people that have these memories of the Second World War, they are dying out. And then we have the social memory. So it's very important now how the social memory will be developed, and how the social memory will be, how it will be, what will be the element, how to educate people, and what we would like to see as a social memory, because this is about young people and new generations. Right?
Okay, the recent, the Nobel Peace Prize for the
European Union.
Has it really helped any youngsters in feeling for it, or is there more internal criticism about it, or is it completely that is ignored by the majority of the people? So how are people receiving it on the ground?
I think that it's a positive, right? We have to receive positive as a positive element. It's very nice that it's known to the globe, to the people or countries, including the United States, so we can say that with the United States again we share their opinion about the peace. However, I'm just still on that question, but having in mind, of course, what you are saying now. But at the same time, we do have a competition, right? For example, in regulations or in relation to the emerging economies, we do have competition between the United States and the European Union. And for example, for trade matters, then very pragmatically we have WTO that can help to solve the disputes between these countries. So there could be cooperation, there could be competition on different contexts. But being back to the issue about how the peace prize was received, I think it was for those who were following the events in the European Union, it was absolutely as a positive and remarkable event, as the European Union as the entity that is bringing peace, and it's one of the values to bring peace and prosperity by its own experience. Because by putting together in cooperation France and Germany, as a result we have peace in security matters. We have common shared values in the European Union.
Questions?
One of your presentation, you said that EU is the undisputed economic power.
representation.
Yes, right.
Yeah. So I don't completely agree with that. In fact, I don't agree with that. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Economic power, when we say a lot of other things also get involved with it, especially ethical issues or regional issues, a lot of things, so we can see everywhere a dispute over there, so on what basis, what made you say that it is an undisputed, or is it something that EU is planning to work towards EU to 2020? Is there something like that? Basically, I want to know what made you, say that, convey to that it is an undisputed region.
If we take the share of the world trade and the European Union, it's a number one. So the largest share of the world trade is or does go to the European Union, and look at this the other way around. So the European Union is the major trading partner, the largest share of the world trade. So this is already, we can say that economically very strong, right? Then we also say that the European Union has its own currency. We have discussed the strengths of the currency, we can discuss the ways this currency was, for example, invented, and how the value was going up and down, and also the position of countries towards the common currency. But we cannot deny it that even when the European Union was in a difficult situation, still the member states of the European Union were applying for the monetary union. We can say that it's maybe not that important because they are too small, because after the crisis there were what countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, were joining the monetary union, so they are not that big. But at the same time, it still shows the importance. There were many forecasts that the monetary union will not survive, that the European Union will not survive, but it's still functioning well, and trying, hardly trying. With 28, it's not that simple, but to have the positive movements and to have the common banking policy, common fiscal policy. You see, so there is quite a rationale behind the steps that the European Union is taking. That's why we cannot say that it's economically not a strong power. It is.
It's the fact sheet right now.
Yeah, but it's difficult. Of course, it's difficult to compete with the United States, to compete with China. It's difficult. Or Asian economies. Let's put that together. Difficult. Yeah, and plus this huge immigration to the European Union that also requires resources to integrate these people. Because if we speak about multiculturalism, it's not only the European nations, but also not always homogeneous. All the countries, in many countries will have more than one state language. For example, in Finland, we have two, which is Swedish and Finnish. However, the Swedish population is not that big, but nevertheless, right? So it's multicultural by itself, but whether it is, and it's getting more and more multicultural with the large portion of immigrants coming to yeah. But whether it's coming to be cosmopolitan, that is another story. That is how we define cosmopolitanism. I'm economist, so you better probably can make the difference and explain what's the difference between multiculturalism and cosmopolitanism and things like that. Yeah. But I live in the cosmopolitan also area, so I understand what it means. People live together, but when they also cooperate together, when they have a similar, they don't have identity, they don't have the same ethnicity, but they feel belongingness to the same state or country or city or area. What do the European Union?
What about your European anthem or the European flag? As symbols, elements. Are they really working? I mean, are people able to attach to these kind of symbols, or is it completely considered very top-down, that is being passed on to people where they have very strong national identities that have long
understand the question. Yeah, I do understand the question. I think we have Europeans in the class, do they?
Yeah.
Yes. So how Europeans, may I also involve Europeans in this discussion? How do you feel about this common elements of culture as flag, for example, or as how do you feel about that? It's definitely not imposed, right?
No.
I don't think so.
Well, I think I mentioned in earlier classes that in my personal case, I don't feel very attached to the European flag or the anthem yet, because I don't think that you said earlier that European Union is like spreading values. I don't really see how they're doing, because what you also said is you can actually get all the information on the internet and you can inform yourself, but it's also a very personal engagement to get closer somewhat to the EU. But then I think it's also probably like maybe a Spanish person or an Italian person. I think it's also very depending on which country you're from. Because in my school, like we went to the European Union and we had all this information, but this was 10 years back. And still I don't feel yet this collective identity in terms of values.
Do you understand the way the European Union functions, that structure? Is there at least some idea of the way it functions and the way it is structured? Or do you find it very complex?
No, depends. I understand, because certain structures, but not as probably Stefan or somebody that is really like dealing with that, or like Tatjana.
But now you are in the European Studies Master Program, right? You are teaching.
I'm teaching.
So that's, no, I think that the more people are engaged in European matters or European actions, for example, if they are part of the Erasmus program, then they obviously feel it. They cannot not feel it, right? The European Union, if they are on the exchange and they come to different countries. That's what, by the way, the European Union is a unique in this sense that provide the exchange program.
I did Erasmus also, and I appreciate it. Like I was in Ireland for a year, so of course I appreciate what they offer us, but still
the identity was not.
I feel that there's a lack of
It's
how
possible.
you convey this collective identity.
Yeah, I agree with you. Just one thing, because I was also worried about that. That when I have, for example, Erasmus students, they in fact come to the institution and they are aimed at certain disciplines, courses, but they don't. The European identity is not that much shaped. But still the movement around that might be helpful.
Yanina has from
Before I came here, I joined some Erasmus program or IBS, the European Voluntary Service, or some other programs. So I felt like I enjoy the benefits and the welfare of being European. But before I came here, I didn't realize what it was. I mean, I was part of that, I represent it, but I didn't have that identity since I came here. I went before in Mexico, for example, and it's also another continent, but I didn't have that feeling. When I came here, I started to say these things that we were discussing. I'm European, but I think it's also because of the culture, the Indian culture makes me feel that. Because they even ask you. They don't ask you if you are Spanish or something in my case. They ask me if I'm European, Australian, or American. So I start with that feeling. And now I have that in my mind more than before.
Yeah, the environment change, I was thinking very often here.
That's very interesting. You know, it's about recognition. It's about the recognition of your identity outside. As a Indian or also as a European, which one would you carry more? That I'll come back to later. Maybe Stefan has something.
I just want to go back to the flag. My personal, very, very personal notes. From my childhood, the memory of the flag from European Union is linked to work in progress. So every time there was some new road built, was the label co-founded by European Union.
That's a very
And that is
It's everywhere.
and is a good memory actually, because I had the feeling, say, thanks to the money of European Union, we finally gonna have a new road or a new, yeah, get it, or a new library. And Italy was, before the Euro crisis, was probably the most Euro-optimist country, because we always had the feeling that the politics at Brussels even was something more serious than one on the national level. So we always had that kind of positive feeling, something like, yeah, finally we're gonna have someone from outside helping us.
But this is why I was saying that it depends on which country you're from. Because
Exactly.
Austria, it was not like that.
But
Yeah.
Austria as well has been, not now anymore, I don't know why, but has always been among the more Euro-optimist countries.
Shrini has a point.
We can continue after all, but I have a feeling that maybe that you were in the UK or something.
How he says it.
No, but I am very, like, I am fond of the European Union. It's just, I think that I mentioned it earlier, I just don't feel yet a collective identity. I still think in Spanish, I mean, even though we are all friends, but for me, it's like, still, I don't feel I feel unified with the whole world, so more, I'm probably more in terms, like, I have the feeling of cosmopolitan, but not.
Has it got something to do with the relation of Austrians with the Germans somewhere?
No, I don't. No, I think this is very.
I don't know why, but Austria is one of the countries that in the last 3 years has lost most of the supporters. So about Euro-optimism, Austria is one of the countries that has suffered more.
But I'm also not thinking, I'm not talking economic or political, it's just a very personal feeling that I have. And this is maybe because I've been traveling a lot in the world and not just, I was never so attached just to Europe.
I feel that, probably when a person doesn't have a feeling of collective identity to European Union, probably it's a generation thing, so probably the next generation will feel more attached to it because they've grown up in that particular environment and they're used to it, they're exposed to it. And our generation probably won't be that attached to it because it already had its own national identity. They were attached to the national identity, because of which I think the transition might be a little more difficult for them. That might be a possibility.
So as a cultural process, will take time. No?
Already it took 60 years of time.
Yeah, Mari was
As a personal thought, what have I seen in the progress of the young movement is it depends how attached is the characteristic of the identity in the individual. Because when Professor Tatjana was talking about the euro, you feel, as we saw Janira, how she was attached to the euro. So she identifies herself to the euro and to the European Eurozone, to the European community in the economic sense. Because for the history, the humanity, entire humanity has been changing from the soul to the gold, to the silver, to the money. So create a new identity through the economic side is really easy to do it. But if we go to something more deeply in the identity of the human being, that is the sense of a nation, the sense of belong to a country, is more hard to try to take it out and to change it or to just to immerse something new. So that's why it's something that is going to take time, it's going to take a lot of time, but it's not impossible to do it. In my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think as Stefano said, when you build some infrastructure for the public and then you label it as co-funded by the European Union, I don't think it helps the integration process. It just helps the public to acknowledge their gratitude towards European Union that some political body or some supranational body is funding. And it doesn't help people to get integrated culturally or even politically to the European Union. And one more question that, this is my comment, and then one more question that I have. For the countries like Latvia, Lithuania, they don't have a global say in global forums. Okay, they are very small. So they, when you integrate many countries, like 28 countries, and come together as a European Union, for them it's really a great thing because they have a global say. But when you consider for the developed countries like Germany and France, they are, even without European Union, they are already developed. So they don't, do they really, the Germans and the French people or the French government, do they really need to be, or they are getting, economically they are benefited. Germans, because of the free trade agreement and the Eurozone and things like that, they are benefited. But as a political entity, do they really, from the bottom of their heart, represent European Union as like culturally unified and politically unified entities? Do they represent in the global forums, or because of the economic benefits, are they?
Do they represent their own interest, or do they represent the interest of the entire region where they go to world forums? You know, as what is asking. Not the interest of everybody.
I understand the question. I understand the question. This is a deep question, but very good one. Good us to think about. But if I again back to the origin of the European Union, there were two countries that had to be together. So that was the idea, to put together to work Germany and France, which was very difficult. It was very difficult for many, many years. And this is one of the most important achievements of the European Union. These two people from these two countries, they not only sit at meetings together, they cooperate, they work together, and they work together for the benefits of the European Union. That is important, because we know that if the decisions very often are coming out from these two countries, and we have two big countries agree, then we'll have the, in many cases, we'll have the agreements of the others, right? So, because these two countries are, in my feelings and knowledge, I think they are oriented at the common benefits of the European Union rather than their own benefits. And Germany, not speaking about France, but Germany was completely destroyed after the Second World War. Yeah? So to talk about the economic power emerged in Germany, a country was politically recognized after the Second World War, I think because of the European Union and because of the economic help that come to the EU countries, well, the Marshall Plan obviously. But then it was a community when Germany played an important role. And since Germany recognized its role in the Second World War, right? The behavior is totalitarian, right, of the country, and the behavior is for the common achievements of the European Union. That I think is what is right now. So that I would say that these two countries represent the Union rather than their own political identity.
This question about the fortress Europe, you know, there is a criticism that we hear very often that the fortress
Excuse me, please, if I may add to this. Germany also, this followed the Berlin Wall. It also brought quite a lot to the identity, to the political identity of Germany. But it was again through the change in the geopolitical context, and not only because the political identity of Germany was growing. It's the result of the changes in the geopolitics. That's how they united. Yeah, but that's of course they became stronger, but they also served as an example for the others how the common market works, how the common monetary union works, because there was the East and West united. So they have different these experiments of the common currency. And again, it was used for the common interests of the European Union.
I think
Sorry, I interrupted you.
I forgot. I think you answered that question now. Yeah.
Okay, multiculturalism. I've asked this question several times and I've not found a very satisfying answer. Multiculturalism
by itself. Now what happens is that it acknowledges several cultures. So, for example, when a Turk goes to probably Austria and they become Austrian Turks, they want to maintain that Turkish identity and become Austrian Turks. So that forms a sort of segregation. So my question is that why is assimilation such a taboo word when it helps the individual integrate into the society better? You know, instead of the segregation that happens probably due to multiculturalism.
It's a very good and complicated question. Yeah. And what colleagues have, what is your opinion about that? I'm not that good at those that are coming to different countries.
Assimilation is a problematic word. It's a problematic word. It is at one end of the continuum, and another one is seclusion or separation of a particular group from the others. And these are the two extremities. The idea is to have a balance. So integration comes as a particular balance. In fact, we have a 5-point scale. In fact, I can provide you later the details as to why assimilation is problematic, because it actually calls for dissolution of somebody's identity, complete dissolution of one's identity to adopt another one. It's like surrendering of your identity to have another, and if it is willfully done, it's okay, but most often there are economic pressures, so there are some pressures that when people are made to change this. These are some unseen pressures, that are not really very visible, that becomes more problematic because you're trying to pressurize people to adopt to your ideology or your ideas. And your identity is being, made to surrender rather than do it willfully. I think if it's done willfully, probably then we'll discuss it in much detail as we progress in our sections.
Just to add into that, for example, now Germany, they are identified worldwide as manufacturer, a good automobile manufacturer. But I think also now it's coming up, all the German products also will be named as EU, made in EU, the car, or if the car can be told as EU made cars. Where is identity like for the German?
So you see that we are having now for cars assimilation, right? Rather than integration.
Yeah.
Examples. But we don't talk about assimilation of people, we are talking about the integration of different cultures. In the EU, that's why we have the languages, all the official languages of the countries of the member state, the official languages of the EU. But this is multiculturalism, this is not assimilation trend.
That is a question, and I come to you soon.
Yes,
I was just thinking, do you think there is enough of intercultural work done by you, like the mutual understanding of the different, because before I met you, I don't know much about Latvian culture. Of course, I could inform myself again, but this is another thing. Like I think there could be a lot more work done by you to make us feel like to create this collective identity.
But is it a collective identity, or is this identity, or to keep the identity of a nation that live together in the region? That's what it is. When we are translating all the documentation to national languages, when we have representatives from nation state, this is about rather multiculturalism in the politics and economics, that everybody has a say, and every country have a veto right, and this is very important, the veto right. Countries do not use often the veto right because it's a dangerous thing. Once you use veto right, and then the others next time will use a veto right against you, right? But for example, Charles de Gaulle, he used 2 times veto not to allow the UK to become a member of the European Union. Now we can judge, was he right or was he wrong, but this is a separate story. But this is all not about assimilation, it's all about, to feel every country, it's a large country or a small country, to be important in this group of 28. That's what it is. That's again, to feel national identity. When Latvia is the presidency or running the presidency of the European Council, who is the most important now in the European Union? Juncker, the president Juncker, or the president of the parliament? Who is the most important? in the European Union? What do you think?
Is it a number in terms of pounds?
Exactly, the council and the country that is running the presidency. So here we are, and then it's a rotating presidency, and there will be another one. So it's all about the identity of the nation that is recognized.
That's very interesting. Okay, I think we have a question from that corner. So, Priya?
I will be deviating a little from what you've been speaking till now, if that's okay. I wanted to know, in your opinion, what do the people of Latvia think of the NATO? Because, growingly they're being quite intrusive in the eastern countries, while the liberals, while the liberals, across the world think it is good that, a presence like NATO is there in ex-communist countries like this. I see that, at times, like even Germany and France get slightly irritable with NATO being a little, intrusive into the EU matters. So I was just wanting to know that, considering how close you guys are to the eastern countries, what is your take on the NATO?
Yes, it is a very good question in relation to the new member states and particularly the Baltic states. Because the Baltic states, they want to have security, right? Political security and economic security. So they made its accession to the European Union and the accession to NATO. And first was accession to NATO and then accession to the European Union. And then what is interesting that in whatever political global events are taking place, the Baltic states on the first hand they support NATO, and then they consider what the European Union members are saying this, because the European Union is not a military institution, right? So we have the members that are member states that have the membership of NATO, and that is very interesting because Germany and France, you're absolutely right, they have their own position with respect to NATO, right? But and not always agree. But the Baltic states always agree. They always agree with NATO is suggested because they feel not secure. And then they think what the big countries are saying in the European Union. Yeah, so, but you're absolutely right, raising this issue because that's what is of a major concern of the Baltic states, because it is a bridge. We try to develop transit because we are a bridge economically, but we are a bridge politically because we are a bridge between the East and West. Because we had German dominance, Swedish dominance, Russian dominance, and Polish presence. So that's why now we have finally Greece because we have the European Union. But NATO provides security because the European Union does not provide any security, and the European Union is not supporting military actions. It cannot, by definition.
I think we have
Thank
had
you for the question.
I think we have had 6 women asking questions compared to 2 men. We're trying for some gender balance. Any questions from a gentleman here? Others who have asked questions but have something to ask.
Out of context now. Are you see any chances in near future for a common fiscal policy? Because I'm asking this question because when the monetary policy was given for a central power, the member states started complaining about losing their national sovereignty, okay, and control over monetary policy. So when the member state question about this national identity and all those things, and I feel personally that European Union would not be complete without having a fiscal and political union in future. So do you see any chances in near future for common fiscal policy?
It's absolutely correct question. Thank you very much. So these are elements that are missing in the monetary union. Because to complete the monetary union, to complete the single market, we need the harmonized fiscal policy, financial fiscal policy. That is not yet harmonized. However, here we have a principle of subsidiarity, right? So that is the national nation states. Yeah. So the primacy, they can use still the taxation, and they use it so differently. But at the same time, to avoid this type of fiscal and financial crisis that we had recently, then the European Union made quite a number of consultations, new regulations, decisions, the banking union, that's why it's now on the way. But fiscal policy, very difficult to harmonize. But I believe that it's really on the way, the harmonization of the fiscal policy. Let's see how much time it will take us. Because as we know, if there is a peaceful time, the European Union is moving slowly. Well, in addition, we should not forget that the European Union right now is not in a very easy economic situation. So there are urgent problems that should be solved also. But the fiscal problems, and it's also one of the elements in the agenda for the new Commission. So thank you again.
I think it's also about the banking union results. Step towards that.
It's a step towards.
We have to have achieved the banking union lobby improvement and have a fiscal union.
There was a debate that started finally on discussing migration issues in the European Commission. And the Commission has recognized 4 key areas. But my question to you is, do you think having a common ground for citizenship could in any way help tackle migration issues? Because every member state have their different citizenship regulations. Do you think having a common citizenship ground, as in, for example, I think France, Italy, Germany have 5 years of living in the same country to, apply for a citizenship. Whereas Austria has 6 years, Belgium has 3 years, and Spain has 2 years. So, don't you think that this is a major problem which is, in a way, helping migration?
Migration is such a complex thing, and the citizenship, it's a lot of not less complex, and I think that it's very difficult to push countries to the common ground for the citizenship. I don't believe that it's an easy thing to do at all for the moment.
For the moment, probably not, but in the
because
future,
countries are so different, and their historical background of all the countries is so different that it's very difficult to say what there will be, what steps they can take, and what can push them really to this. Because something should push the countries to recognize, if there is a need to recognize that there is a need to have a common citizenship ground. You have to prove it. It's not that obvious that there should be a harmonization of these citizenship rights in all these 28. I'm not so sure that it's needed.
And it's also about having different.
But you put it in relation to the migration policy.
Migration policy is there, no, but I think it depends a lot on from where the migrants come. Even they have migration, happening from peripheral Europe to Western Europe. They have migrants from the erstwhile colonies to the colonizers, and then there's also Islamic immigrants in Europe. So these are 3 very different immigrants coming into and each one has to be dealt very separately, very differently, and that's what I think is understanding. They're very, very conscious as well as cautious about.
That's why they are fragmented as a result. Harmonization context, they are fragmented. To harmonize them, I think it takes time.
so out of the 4 key areas that we have concentrated upon, which one do you think, in your personal opinion, should matter in our
these 4 areas?
Yesterday it was all about one is about tighter border controls, one is about fighting human trafficking, then another one is about a new European policy on legal migration, and there's also a strong common asylum system.
I'm not so sure that it's easy to point out which one is the most important. because all of them are of serious importance for all the countries and for all the people. Human trafficking is a huge thing, and for example, there is in Antwerp, there is a very interesting and very efficient NGO, Payoki, that is named Payoki, so the people that are interested in human trafficking. They are doing outstanding job to help to tackle the problem. Well, in this area, obviously, but then due to the work of the president of Payoki, there were a number of regulations, where a number of regulations passed the European Parliament in this area of human trafficking. So this is a lot of work done, but still a lot of work needed to be done, because unfortunately this problem is still growing in the world and in the developing countries, still growing. And the major reason is poverty for all the human trafficking. It's not only the criminals that are there, but the poverty that should be tackled. And then the problem is how to tackle the poverty. So, and they are some problems that I think they are also related to the same economic background, all of the economic background actually. But at the same time, we know that in economics there is 90% of politics, and politics there is 90% of economics. So let's tackle economic problems, and then we will have a good ground for solving our political issues and cultural issues.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we'll have to close it here because I think there's another class at 6 o'clock here. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for the questions. I know there will be many more questions, but we'll have to close it here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me this week. It was a real pleasure, and I did it with enthusiasm, and this enthusiasm that I also received from you and see here in the classes, I will give to my home country and will share with my students, and will share knowledge about Manipal and students that are eager to know and learn more about the European Union. And you are all welcome to Riga, I mean it seriously. So let's stay in contact and see how we can cooperate and need some more time, and I would like you to also meet my students. Let's make it possible. Yes. Thank you very much again.